The alarms had been screaming for 6 hours now. Celia pressed her hands against her ears, but the sound still found its way through. Red emergency lights flashed across the communications center, painting everything in the color of blood and warning. She was young for a Valantian, barely past her third molting cycle. Her silver scales had not yet darkened to the deep blue of maturity. She had taken this job at the planetary communications hub because it was supposed to be quiet work. Velantis Prime was a peaceful world. Nothing ever happened here. Now everything was happening at once. Report from the outer defense satellites called her supervisor, a tired old male named Torvis. His scales had faded to gray long ago. The Kreth have established a complete blockade. Nothing is getting in or out. Celia looked at her screens. Hundreds of red dots surrounded their world like a swarm of angry insects. Each dot was a Kreth warship. Each warship carried enough weapons to level a city. The Valantians had no warships. They had no weapons at all. For 3,000 years, they had devoted themselves to medicine and healing. Their hospitals were famous across the galaxy. Species from 100 worlds came to Velantis Prime to be cured of diseases that their own doctors could not treat. But hospitals could not stop an invasion. Have we received any response from the Galactic Council? Celia asked. Her voice trembled slightly. Torvis shook his head. His long neck swayed with the movement. The council is debating. They say they need to verify the threat. They say they need to vote on intervention. They say, he stopped and made a sound of disgust. They say many things. They do nothing. Through the reinforced windows of the communications center, Celia could see the sky. It should have been the soft purple of evening. Instead, it glowed with unnatural light. The Kreth ships were so numerous that they blocked out the stars. A new message appeared on her screen. It was from the Kreth commander. She read it aloud for everyone to hear. People of Velantis Prime, you have been selected for incorporation into the Kreth Dominion. Resistance is not advised. You will lower your planetary shields with interrotations. You will surrender all governmental authority to Kreth administration. You will provide full access to your medical facilities and research. Failure to comply will result in orbital bombardment of civilian population centers. This is not a negotiation. This is your reality. Accept it. The message was signed by someone called High Subjugator Morvax. The communications center fell silent. 20 Valantians stood frozen at their stations. Some were crying. Others simply stared at nothing, their minds unable to process what was happening. Celia thought about her family. Her parents lived in the capital city. Her younger brother was still in school. If the Kreth started bombing, they would be among the first to die. There must be someone who can help us, she said. Someone in the galaxy who cares. No one cares about the weak, Torvis replied. His voice was hollow with despair. The Kreth have conquered 42 worlds. No one stopped them. No one even tried. The strong do what they want. The weak suffer what they must. This is the way of things. Celia refused to accept this. She turned back to her console and began searching through communication frequencies. The standard channels were useless. The Galactic Council was useless. She needed to find someone else. Anyone else. Her search brought her to a section of the frequency spectrum that was marked with warning symbols. The Death World Corridor. These were channels reserved for communication with species from Class 10 planets and above. Worlds so dangerous that most civilized species avoided them entirely. Torvis noticed what she was doing. Celia, no. Those channels are restricted for a reason. Death World species are unpredictable, violent, primitive. They would not help us, and they might make things worse. How could things be worse? Celia asked. She gestured at the window, at the glowing sky full of enemy ships. The Kreth are going to kill us all. What do we have to lose? Before Torvis could stop her, she opened a broadcast on all Death World frequencies. Her hands shook as she spoke into the transmitter. This is Velantis Prime calling any ships in range. We are under attack by the Kreth Dominion. We are a peaceful world. We have no military. We have no way to defend ourselves. Our population is 4 billion. We have done nothing wrong. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help. We are sending our coordinates. Please, someone, anyone, help us. She repeated the message 3 times. Then she sat back and waited. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. The red dots on her screen continued their slow patrol around the planet. The alarms continued to scream. The emergency lights continued to flash. Torvis put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You tried," he said. "That is more than most would do. But we must accept reality now. We must prepare our people for what is coming." Celia wanted to argue. She wanted to believe that somewhere out there, someone had heard her call. But the universe seemed very large and very cold and very empty. Then her console beeped. She looked at the screen. A message was coming in on one of the Death World frequencies. The signal was strong and clear. The language was one she had never seen before. But her translator quickly decoded it. The message was short. Just 3 sentences. Message received. Hold position. We are coming. Celia stared at the words. Her hearts began to beat faster. Someone answered, she whispered. Someone is coming. Torvis leaned over her shoulder to read the message. His old eyes widened. Who sent this? What species? Celia checked the signal data. The transmission had originated from a system on the far edge of the galactic arm. A system that contained only one inhabited world. A world classified as a Class 12 death world. One of the most dangerous planets ever recorded. Terrans, she said. The message came from the Terrans. Torvis took a step backward. His scales paled to a sickly gray. Earth, he said. The message came from Earth. Who are the Terrans? Celia asked. She had never heard of them. Torvis was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was strange. They are old, he said. Very old. They were among the first Death World species to achieve space travel. For a time, they were active in galactic affairs. Then they withdrew. They returned to their home system and stopped communicating with the rest of the galaxy. Why did they withdraw? No one knows for certain. Some say they were disgusted by the wars and exploitation they saw in civilized space. Some say they were too dangerous, too violent, and the Council asked them to leave. Some say they simply lost interest in the rest of us. Torvis paused. I was young when they left, but I remember the stories my teachers told. They said the Terrans were like nothing else in the galaxy. They said the Terrans came from a world so deadly that it made them into something remarkable. They said we should be grateful that the Terrans chose peace, and now they are coming here. Celia said. So it seems. Torvis looked at the message on her screen. I hope they remember how to make war, because if they do not, then they are coming here to die with us. The hours passed slowly. The Kreth continued their blockade. Their commanders sent more messages, each one more threatening than the last. The planetary government met in emergency session, debating whether to surrender or fight. But there was nothing to fight with. The Valantians had healing technology. They had research facilities. They had hospitals. They did not have a single weapon. Celia stayed at her station. She kept her eyes on the long-range sensors, watching for any sign of approaching ships. She did not know what to expect. The message had said they were coming. But how many? And how soon? And would it matter? The Kreth fleet numbered over 600 warships. Each one was designed for conquest and destruction. They had been built to crush resistance and terrify populations into submission. They were very good at their job. One message from an unknown Death World species seemed like a very small hope against such overwhelming force, but it was the only hope they had. On the bridge of his flagship, High Subjugator Morvax reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The conquest of Velantis Prime was proceeding exactly as planned. The locals were terrified and helpless. The Galactic Council was doing what it always did, which was nothing useful. In 2 more rotations, he would begin the bombardment. In 3, the planet would surrender. In 4, he would be celebrating another successful conquest. His aide approached with a data tablet. High Subjugator, our listening posts have intercepted an unusual transmission. Unusual how? The Valantians sent a distress call on Death World frequencies. Someone responded. Morvax took the tablet and read the intercepted message. He laughed. Terrans. I have never heard of them. They are from a Class 12 death world called Earth, the aide explained. They were briefly active in galactic affairs approximately 2 centuries ago, then withdrew to their home system. Very little is known about their current capabilities. A species that hides in its own system for 200 years is not a threat, Morvax said. They are probably primitive now, forgotten. They send brave messages because they have nothing else to offer. Should we increase sensor coverage on the system perimeter? Morvax considered this for a moment. Yes, do that. But do not divert any significant resources. The Valantians are trying to frighten us with ghost stories. It will not work. This conquest will proceed as planned. He dismissed his aide and returned to his planning. There was still much work to do. The Kreth Dominion did not. High Subjugator Morvax did not like mysteries. He had built his career on certainty. He knew how to read an enemy. He knew how to calculate odds. He knew how to win. But the Terrans were a mystery, and this bothered him. He sat alone in his private quarters, scrolling through the galactic database on his personal terminal. The entry for Earth was surprisingly short. Most species had pages and pages of information. Trade agreements, diplomatic incidents, military capabilities, cultural notes. The Terrans had almost nothing. Planet designation, Earth, also called Terra. Classification, Class 12 Death World. Primary species, Homo sapiens Terrans, humans. Status, isolated. Minimal contact with galactic community. That was almost all the database contained. There were a few images of the planet itself. It looked like a blue and green ball floating in space. Pretty, in a simple way. The kind of world that should have produced soft, gentle creatures. But it was a Class 12 death world. That meant it was one of the most dangerous planets ever recorded. Morvax had never visited a death world. Few Kreth had. Such places were avoided for good reason. The gravity was wrong. The atmosphere was wrong. The native life forms were aggressive and unpredictable. Everything about a death world was hostile to civilized life. He found a section of the database that contained environmental data about Earth. He read it carefully. The planet had a gravity nearly twice the galactic average. Its atmosphere contained high levels of oxygen, which was technically a poison that caused cellular damage over time. The surface was mostly covered in a corrosive liquid called water. The planet experienced violent weather events including massive electrical storms, rotating wind systems that could destroy entire cities, and waves of superheated matter during certain seasons. And that was just the environment. The native life was worse. Earth was home to microscopic organisms that could invade a body and destroy it from the inside. It had plants that produced toxic chemicals. It had insects that drank blood. It had predators with razor teeth and incredible speed. It had creatures in its oceans that were so large and so dangerous that even the Terrans avoided them. How did any species survive on such a world? Morvax found some historical records from the brief period when Terrans had been active in galactic affairs. He read about their first contact with other species. He read about their initial wonder at discovering they were not alone in the universe. He read about their attempts to join the galactic community. Then he found the reports about why they had left. The Terrans had been horrified by what they found in civilized space. They had expected peace and cooperation. Instead, they found that the galaxy was full of wars, exploitation, and cruelty. Strong species preyed on weak ones. The Galactic Council existed, but it rarely helped anyone. Justice was a word that meant nothing. One report quoted a Terran diplomat who had spoken to the Council before their withdrawal. The words had been recorded by a journalist who was present. "We came to the stars, hoping to find the best of ourselves reflected back at us. Instead, we found the worst. You have technology that could end suffering forever, but you use it to create more suffering. You have the power to help each other, but you use that power to hurt each other. We thought that leaving our violent past behind meant joining something better. We were wrong. We are going home now. Maybe someday the galaxy will be ready for us. Maybe someday you will remember what it means to protect the innocent. Until then, we want nothing to do with any of you." The Terrans had left shortly after that. They had returned to their home system and closed their borders. For 200 years, they had remained silent. Ships that approached their territory were warned to turn back. Those that ignored the warnings were never seen again. Morvax finished reading and sat back in his chair. He was troubled, but he was not worried. These were old records. 200 years was a long time. Species changed. They grew soft. They forgot how to fight. The Terrans had been isolating themselves on their single planet for generations. They were probably weak now, divided, primitive. Their message to the Valantians was an empty gesture, words without substance. And yet something nagged at him. Something in those old reports. He called for his aide. The young officer appeared quickly, standing at attention. "Tell me," Morvax said. "What do we know about Terran military capabilities?" The aide consulted his data tablet. "Very little, High Subjugator. The Terrans have not engaged in any known conflict since their withdrawal. There are no recent observations of their military forces. What about their history? Before they discovered space travel? I would need to search the archives. Such information is rarely considered relevant. Search the archives. I want to know everything about Terran warfare. Bring me the full report." The aide bowed and left. Morvax turned back to his terminal. He found himself looking at images of Earth again. That blue and green ball. So peaceful from a distance. So deadly up close. What kind of creatures did such a world create? The aide returned 2 hours later. His face was strange. He looked like someone who had seen something disturbing and was still trying to understand it. "I found the records," he said. "The Terrans have a long history of warfare. Very long. All species have wars," Morvax said. "That is not unusual. With respect, High Subjugator, the Terrans are unusual." The aide placed his data tablet on the desk. Their recorded history spans approximately 10,000 years. During that time, there have been over 15,000 armed conflicts, major wars, minor wars, civil wars, world wars. The Terrans have been fighting each other almost continuously since they developed the ability to make weapons. Morvax felt the first small seed of doubt in his chest. That is impossible. No species could survive such constant warfare. The Terrans did not merely survive. They thrived. Each war made them better at making war. They developed weapons of incredible destructive power. They created military strategies of sophisticated complexity. They built armies that numbered in the millions. The aide paused. They invented weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single moment. They created poisons that could kill every living thing on a continent. They designed machines specifically intended to cause maximum suffering to other Terrans. Why would they do such things to each other? The records suggest many reasons: territory, resources, ideology, religion, pride, fear. Sometimes no reason at all. The aide shook his head slowly. The Terrans were very good at killing each other. They refined it into an art form. They wrote poetry about it. They gave medals to those who did it best. Morvax was silent for a long moment. But they stopped. They became peaceful. They stopped fighting each other, mostly. They did not stop being what they are. The aide brought up more information on his tablet. Before their withdrawal from Galactic affairs, there was an incident. A Terran transport ship was attacked by pirates near the outer colonies. The pirates killed the crew and took the cargo. They thought it would be an easy target. What happened? The Terrans responded. They tracked the pirates to their base. Then they destroyed it, completely. Not just the pirates who had attacked the transport, but every pirate in that entire sector. They hunted them for 3 standard years. They did not stop until there were no pirates left. How many ships did they use? 17. The aide's voice was quiet. 17 ships destroyed over 100 pirate vessels and 12 hidden bases. The Terrans lost for ships. The pirates lost everything. Morvax stared at the tablet. The numbers did not make sense. How could 17 ships defeat over 100? Even with superior technology, the odds were impossible. There is one more thing, the aide said. After they finished with the pirates, the Terrans sent a message to every criminal organization in the sector. The message was short. It said, "We remember. We always remember. Do not give us a reason to come back." And did anyone give them a reason? No. Piracy in that sector dropped to almost zero. It remained that way until the Terrans withdrew from Galactic affairs. Morvax stood up from his desk. He walked to the window of his quarters and looked out at the stars. His fleet surrounded Velata's Prime like a net of iron and fire. 600 warships, the greatest military force in this region of space. But somewhere out there, something was coming. Something old and dangerous. Something that had learned to make war in a classroom of blood and fire. Something that had chosen peace not because it was weak, but because it was so strong that war had become boring. Increase sensor coverage on all approach vectors, Morvax ordered. I want to know the moment anything enters this system. Yes, High Subjugator. Is there anything else? Morvax turned from the window. Yes, begin the bombardment early. Target civilian infrastructure, water treatment, power generation, medical facilities. I want the Valantians begging to surrender by morning. The timeline called for 2 more rotations of psychological pressure. Before, the timeline has changed. We need to finish this conquest quickly. Before anyone has a chance to interfere, the aide bowed and left to carry out the orders. Morvax remained at the window. He was not afraid. He refused to be afraid. The Kreth Dominion had not conquered 42 worlds by being afraid of ghost stories and old legends, but for the first time in many years, he was uncertain, and uncertainty, in his experience, often came before disaster. Far below on Velantis Prime, the first bombs began to fall. Buildings that had stood for centuries crumbled. The sensor officer on the Kreth early warning station was young and bored. He had been watching empty space for 6 hours. Nothing ever happened on the outer patrol. All the action was near the planet, where the bombardment continued to light up the sky. He was thinking about requesting a transfer to a combat vessel when his console began to beep. At first, he thought it was a malfunction. The readings made no sense. There seemed to be a mass of objects approaching the system at impossible speed. He ran a diagnostic on his equipment. Everything was functioning normally. He ran the scan again. The objects were still there, and they were closer now. Commander, he called out. I am detecting multiple contacts on long-range sensors. The station commander walked over to look at his screen. How many contacts? I am not certain. The signatures are overlapping, but based on the energy readings, the young officer paused. He checked his calculations twice. At least 300. Possibly more. 300? That cannot be correct. Run the scan again. I have run it 3 times. The contacts are real. They are approaching at faster than light speeds. Estimated arrival at the system boundary is... He checked his instruments. 40 minutes. The commander's face went pale. Open a channel to the flagship. Priority 1. The High Subjugator needs to see this immediately, on the bridge of his flagship. Morvax was watching the bombardment of Velantis Prime with satisfaction. The capital city was burning. The planetary shield was weakening. In a few more hours, he would be able to land ground forces and complete the conquest. Then his communications officer interrupted him. High Subjugator, we are receiving an urgent message from the outer sensor station. They are detecting a large number of incoming ships. Morvax frowned. How large? They estimate between 300 and 400 vessels. For a moment, Morvax said nothing. He simply stared at the officer as if waiting for the joke to be explained. That is not possible. He finally said, there is no fleet of that size in this region of space. Not even our own Dominion fleet is that large. The sensor data appears to be accurate. The ships are approaching at high speed. They will reach the system boundary within 30 minutes. Morvax moved to the tactical display. He studied the sensor readings himself. The contacts were real. They were numerous, and they were coming fast. Can you identify the ship types? He asked. Not yet. They are using an unknown drive signature. Our databases have no match. Unknown drive signature. Unknown ship types. An unknown fleet appearing from nowhere to challenge his conquest. Morvax felt the first cold touch of fear in his chest. He pushed it away with anger. It is a trick, he said. The Valantians are projecting false sensor images to make us think help is coming. Order all ships to maintain position. Continue the bombardment. We will not be fooled by illusions. Yes, High Subjugator. But 20 minutes later, the illusions became very real. The Terran fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Velantis system. 400 warships emerged from the void in perfect formation. They moved with a precision that spoke of long training and absolute discipline. Celia was at her console in the underground bunker when the sensor alert came through. She looked at the screen and felt her heart's stop. Torvis, she whispered. Look, the old Valantian limped over to her station. He had been injured in the last bombardment, and one of his legs was wrapped in bandages. But he forgot his pain when he saw what was on the screen. Ships, hundreds of ships, arranged in a formation that spread across thousands of kilometers of space. They were not Kreth. They were not any design that the galactic database recognized. They were Terran. They came, Celia said. Her voice cracked. They actually came, all across Velantis Prime. The same scene was repeated. In shelters and bunkers, in hospitals and refugee centers. People looked at their screens and saw salvation arriving from the stars. Some cried. Some laughed. Some dropped to their knees in gratitude. After hours of bombing and terror, after watching their cities burn and their people die, hope had finally arrived on the Kreth flagship. Morvax stared at the tactical display with growing horror. These were not illusions. These were not tricks. These were real warships, and there were more of them than he had ever seen in one place. Open a channel, he ordered. I want to speak to whoever commands that fleet. A moment later, a voice filled his bridge. It was calm and clear and completely without fear. This is Admiral Chen Wei of the Terran Combined Fleet. I am addressing the Kreth forces currently attacking Velantis Prime. You have launched an unprovoked assault on a peaceful world that has requested Terran protection. You will cease all hostile actions immediately. You will withdraw from this system within 1 hour. There will be no negotiation. There will be no second warning. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your fleet. Admiral Chen Wei, out. The channel closed. Silence filled the bridge. Morvax found his voice. She dares to threaten us? We outnumber her fleet by 200 ships. Does she not understand basic mathematics? His tactical officer spoke carefully. High Subjugator, I am analyzing the Terran ship designs. They are unusual. Their vessels are heavily armored. They appear to be carrying multiple weapon systems that I do not recognize. I cannot accurately assess their combat capabilities. They are bluffing, Morvax insisted. They must be bluffing. No sane commander would challenge a numerically superior force with such confidence. But even as he said it, he remembered what his aide had told him about the Terrans. 17 ships destroying 100 pirate vessels. A species that had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war. A species that came from a world so dangerous that it made them dangerous in return. What if they were not bluffing? High Subjugator, his communications officer said. The Valantians have detected the Terran fleet. Our ground forces are reporting that the civilian population is becoming difficult to control. They are celebrating in the streets. They believe they have been rescued. Morvax slammed his fist against the armrest of his command chair. This was supposed to be an easy conquest. This was supposed to add to his glory and reputation. This was not supposed to involve an ancient Deathworld species emerging from isolation. To challenge the might of the Kreth Dominion, all ships, form battle line, he ordered. We will teach these Terrans the price of interference. They may have numbers, but we have experience. We have conquered 42 worlds. What have they conquered? Nothing. They have been hiding in their own system for centuries. They have probably forgotten how to fight. His fleet began to move. 600 warships arranged themselves into an offensive formation. It was an impressive display of military power. The Kreth had used this formation many times before. It had never failed them. But across the vast distance of space, the Terran fleet was also moving. And there was something different about the way they moved. Something almost casual. As if this was not a desperate battle for survival, but a simple exercise. As if they had done this many times before. Admiral Chen Wei stood at the center of her bridge, hands clasped behind her back. The tactical display showed the Kreth fleet arranging itself for battle. She studied their formation with the eye of a lifetime soldier. Predictable, she said quietly. They are using a standard wedge assault formation. They expect to overwhelm us with their numerical advantage, her executive officer. A tall man named James Morrison nodded. They do have more ships than us. Numbers are not everything. Discipline, training, technology, and will. These things matter more than raw numbers. Chen Wei turned to face her crew. All ships, maintain formation. Do not fire until my command. Let them come to us. Let them think they have the advantage. Then show them how wrong they are. The Terran fleet held its position. 400 ships floating in the void like a wall of steel and purpose. They watched the Kreth fleet approach. They watched the enemy ships power up their weapons. They watched and waited. On Velantis Prime, Celia could barely breathe. She watched the two fleets on her sensor display. The Kreth had more ships. The Kreth were attacking. How could the Terrans possibly survive? They are not moving, Torvis observed. The Terrans are just sitting there. Maybe they are afraid, said another officer. Maybe they realize they made a mistake. No, Celia said. She did not know why she was so certain, but she was. They are waiting for something. The Kreth fleet crossed the halfway point between the system boundary and Velantis Prime. They were moving at full attack speed now. Their weapons were charged. Their targeting systems were locked. Morvax watched the Terran fleet grow larger on his view screen. They still had not moved. They still had not fired. What were they doing? Something is wrong, he muttered. They should be retreating. They should be trying to maneuver. Why are they just waiting? Perhaps they are paralyzed by fear, his aide suggested. Or perhaps they know something we do not. The Kreth fleet reached optimal firing range. Morvax raised his hand to give the order to attack, and then the Terran fleet finally moved. It happened so fast that the Kreth sensors could barely track it. 400 ships accelerated in perfect unison. They did not scatter or spread out like a normal fleet under attack. They moved as one single entity, flowing around the Kreth. The bridge of the Kreth flagship was filled with smoke and screaming. Consoles exploded. Officers shouted damage reports. The ship shuddered as another hit tore through the outer hull. Warning lights flashed in every direction. Morvax gripped the armrests of his command chair and watched his fleet die. 300 ships destroyed in less than 30 minutes. 300 ships that had been the pride of the Kreth Dominion, reduced to burning wreckage floating in the void. His remaining vessels were scattered and confused. Some were trying to fight back. Others were attempting to flee. None of them were succeeding. How? He whispered to himself. How is this possible? He had studied war for his entire life. He had conquered 42 worlds. He had never seen anything like this. The Terran fleet moved through his formation like predators through a herd of prey. They seemed to know exactly where each Kreth ship would be before it got there. They fired with impossible accuracy. They evaded with impossible speed. Every movement was perfect. Every shot was deadly. This was not a battle. This was an execution. High Subjugator. His communications officer shouted over the chaos. We are receiving multiple surrender signals from our own fleet. Captains are striking their colors. They refuse to continue fighting. Order them to hold position. Order them to fight. They are not responding. They say the battle is lost. They say continued resistance is suicide. Morvax stood up from his chair. His legs trembled, but he forced himself to remain standing. He would not show weakness. Not even now. Open a channel to the Terran flagship, he ordered. I wish to speak with their admiral. The bridge fell silent. Everyone stared at him. Opening negotiations during battle was an admission of defeat. For a Kreth commander, it was the greatest shame imaginable. But shame was better than total destruction. A moment later, Admiral Chen Wei appeared on the main view screen. She stood calmly on her bridge, hands clasped behind her back. There was no excitement in her eyes, no triumph, only the cold patience of someone who had already won and was simply waiting for her enemy to realize it. High Subjugator Morvax, she said, I assume you are ready to discuss terms. What terms do you offer? Unconditional surrender. You will power down all weapons. You will lower all shields. You will release any prisoners or hostages. Your ships will be escorted out of the system under Terran guard. You will never return. And if I refuse? Chen Wei's expression did not change. Then we will destroy every ship in your fleet. We will leave no survivors. We will then pursue your dominion to its home system and ensure that they can never threaten another peaceful world again. She paused. You have 5 minutes to decide. The channel closed. Morvax stood alone in the center of his damaged bridge. His officers watched him. His crew watched him. Everyone waited to see what he would do. He thought about his fleet, his 300 destroyed ships, his remaining 300 that were scattered and demoralized. He thought about his career, his reputation, his glory. Then he thought about the Terrans. He thought about what they had done to his fleet in 30 minutes. He thought about what they could do if they decided to pursue the Dominion home. And he made his choice. All ships, Power down weapons, he said. His voice was hollow. Lower shields. Prepare for surrender. High subjugator, you cannot, I can, and I will. Morvax turned to face his protesting officer. Look at the tactical display. Look at what we have lost. If we continue to fight, we will all die. Every ship, every crew member, everyone. The Terrans will destroy us completely. And then they will come for our home worlds. But the shame, there is no shame in survival. Morvax sat back down in his chair. He felt very old suddenly. Very tired. The Kreth Dominion has been humiliated today. But we still exist. We can rebuild. We can learn. And maybe, if we are wise, we will never make the mistake of challenging the Terrans again. Across the battlefield, the remaining Kreth ships began to power down. Weapons went cold. Shields lowered. One by one, the conquerors admitted defeat. Admiral Chen Wei watched the surrender on her tactical display. She nodded slowly. It was done, Admiral, her executive officer said. What do we do with them? Escort them to the system boundary. Make sure they leave. Then establish a permanent patrol around Velantis Prime. The Valantians asked for our protection. They will have it, yes, Admiral. And, if I may ask, why did you offer them the chance to surrender? We could have destroyed them all. They deserved it, after what they did to the Valantians. Chen Wei was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. Do you know why humanity withdrew from galactic affairs 200 years ago, Commander? The records say we were disgusted by what we found in civilized space. That is true, but it is not the whole truth. Chen Wei walked to the large window at the front of the bridge. She looked out at the stars, at the debris of the battle, at the surviving Kreth ships that were now powerless and broken. When we first reached the stars, we thought we had left our violent past behind us. We thought space would be different, better. We thought that the advanced species of the galaxy would have learned the lessons that we had learned through so much suffering. But they had not. No, they had not. The galaxy was full of cruelty and exploitation. Strong species preyed on weak ones. No one protected the innocent. No one stood up for those who could not protect themselves. Chen Wei turned back to face her officer. And we realized something terrible. We realized that we were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Our history of violence had made us better at war than anyone else. Our technology was more advanced. Our tactics were more sophisticated. Our weapons were more deadly. If we stayed in galactic affairs, we would eventually become the greatest conquerors the universe had ever seen. So we left to prevent ourselves from becoming monsters. Yes, we went home. We focused on building a better society. We tried to become the peaceful species we wanted to be. Chen Wei smiled sadly. But we knew that someday, someone would need us. Someone would call for help, and there would be no one else to answer. So we kept building ships. We kept training soldiers. We kept preparing for the day when the galaxy would need protectors instead of conquerors. And today was that day. Today was that day. Chen Wei looked at the surrendering Kreth fleet. We could destroy them all. They deserve it. But that is not who we choose to be. We came here to protect the innocent, not to commit slaughter. The Kreth have been defeated. They will remember this lesson. They will tell others. And maybe, slowly, the galaxy will learn that there is a species out there who will answer when the helpless call. A species who will protect those who cannot protect themselves. Her executive officer nodded slowly. I understand, Admiral. But what about justice? The Kreth killed thousands of Valantians. They destroyed cities. They terrorized an entire world. Justice is not our responsibility. The Valantians will decide what happens to any Kreth prisoners. The Galactic Council will decide whether to punish the Dominion for their aggression. Our job is to stop the killing. That is what we have done. And if the Kreth do this again, to another world, Chen Wei's eyes grew hard. Then we will answer again. And next time, we will not offer them the chance to surrender. On Velantis Prime, the celebration had begun. People poured out of shelters and bunkers. They looked up at the sky and saw that the enemy ships were retreating. They saw that the bombardment had stopped. They saw that they were going to survive. Celia left the underground communications center for the first time in days. The surface was a disaster. Buildings had collapsed. Streets were filled with rubble. Fires still burned in some districts, but people were singing. People were dancing. People were hugging strangers and crying tears of joy. She found her parents in a refugee shelter near the remains of their home. Her mother grabbed her and would not let go. Her father kept repeating thank you to no one in particular. Her younger brother was alive. He had been at school when the bombing started. The teachers had led all the children to a deep basement. They had stayed there for 2 days, singing songs to keep the children calm. Who saved us? Her mother asked. Who came to help? The Terrans, Celia said. Humans from Earth. I sent a distress call on their frequency, and they came. But why? Why would strangers come to help us? Celia did not know the answer, but she intended to find out. 2 days later, the Terran fleet was still in orbit around Velantis Prime. Admiral Chen Wei agreed to meet with representatives of the Valantian government. They gathered in what remained of the Planetary Council chamber, a building that had been half destroyed by Kreth bombs. Celia was there. She had been invited because she was the one who had sent the original distress call. She stood in the back of the room, watching as the Admiral entered. Chen Wei was smaller than Celia had expected. The Valantians towered over her, but there was something about her presence that made her seem larger, stronger. More important, the Valantian Prime Minister, an elderly female named Korath, stepped forward to greet the Admiral. On behalf of all Valantians, I thank you, she said. You saved our world. You saved our people. We will never forget what you have done. Chen Wei bowed her head slightly. We came because you asked for help. That is all. But why? We have no treaty with Earth. We have no alliance. We have nothing to offer you. Why did you risk your ships and your people for strangers? Chen Wei was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, Earth's Galactic Council was in chaos. Representatives from over 100 species crowded the Great Assembly Hall on the station. At the center of known space, they had been arguing for 3 days without reaching any conclusion. The topic was always the same. The Terrans, the Battle of Velantis Prime, the impossible fleet that had appeared from nowhere and destroyed the Kreth Dominion. In less than an hour, Ambassador Vex of the Morlani Consortium stood at the central podium. His species was known for their careful diplomacy and calculated neutrality. Today, he looked afraid. The Terrans have demonstrated capabilities far beyond anything we imagined, he said. Their weapons penetrated Kreth shields as if they were made of paper. Their ships moved with coordination and speed that our best tacticians cannot explain. In 32 minutes, they destroyed 300 warships and forced the surrender of 300 more. A murmur rippled through the assembly. We must consider what this means, Vex continued. For 200 years, we believed the Terrans had become a minor, isolated species. We ignored them. We forgot about them. Now we discover that they have been building a military force, capable of defeating the 4th largest navy in the galaxy without breaking a sweat. Representative Groth of the Gennari Federation spoke up. What do they want? What are their demands? That is perhaps the most unsettling part, Vex replied. They want nothing. Admiral Chen Wei has stated that the Terrans will not seek membership in the Council. They will not pursue territorial expansion. They will not demand tribute or trade concessions. They simply want to be left alone. Then what was the point of the battle? The Valantians sent a distress call. The Terrans answered. The assembly fell silent. This was difficult to understand. Species did not risk their fleets and their soldiers for strangers. They did not travel across the galaxy to fight other people's battles. There was always an angle. There was always a benefit. But the Terrans seemed to have no angle. They had come, they had fought, they had won, and they had asked for nothing in return. Representative Moshe of the Talon Empire rose from her seat. Her species had been rivals of the Kreth for centuries. They should have been celebrating the Dominion's defeat. Instead, she looked worried. I have reviewed all available intelligence on the Terrans, she said. I have studied their history. I have analyzed their technology. And I have come to a conclusion that I find deeply disturbing. Share it with us, Representative. The Terrans could conquer the galaxy if they wished. Another murmur, louder this time. Some representatives laughed nervously. Others simply stared. Consider the facts, Moshe continued. Their ships are faster, stronger, and better armed than anything we have. Their tactical coordination suggests either advanced artificial intelligence or generations of combat experience. They destroyed the Kreth fleet in minutes. Minutes, if they wanted to. They could move from system to system, crushing any resistance. Within a decade, they could control every inhabited world in known space. But they do not want to, said Ambassador Vex. That is what they say. But why should we believe them? Because of their history, a new voice spoke up. It was old and quiet, but it carried across the assembly hall with surprising strength. Everyone turned to look. The speaker was Elder Koroth, the Prime Minister of Velatus Prime. She had traveled to the council station specifically to address this meeting. Her silver scales were dulled with age and fatigue, but her eyes were sharp. I have spoken with Admiral Chenwei, Koroth said. I have studied the records they shared with us. I believe I understand the Terrans better than anyone else in this room. Then enlighten us, Representative Moshe said. Why should we trust a species capable of galactic conquest? Koroth moved slowly to the central podium. She looked out at the assembled representatives, at the faces of 200 species who were terrified of a threat they did not understand. The Terrans come from a world that tried to kill them every day of their existence, she began. Their planet is poisonous, violent, and unpredictable. They survived by being harder than their environment. They evolved to be strong, fast, and intelligent. But most importantly, they evolved to work together, to cooperate, to help each other. Many species cooperate, Representative Groth interrupted. That does not make them trustworthy. You do not understand. Let me explain. Koroth's voice grew stronger. For 10,000 years, the Terrans fought among themselves. They waged wars of unimaginable destruction. They developed weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization. Multiple times, they came close to extinction by their own hands. This does not inspire confidence. It should, because despite all of that, they did not destroy themselves. They learned. They changed. They looked at their own capacity for violence and decided to become something better. Koroth paused. Do you know what the Terrans call their greatest achievement? It is not their weapons. It is not their ships. It is not their technology. It is the fact that they stopped fighting each other. For over 300 years, there has been no major war on Earth. They united as a species. They chose peace. The assembly was quiet now. Everyone was listening, but they did not forget how to fight. Koroth continued. They kept their weapons. They trained their soldiers. They built their fleets, not because they wanted to use them, but because they knew that someday, someone might need their help. Someone might call into the darkness and need a response. And when my world called, they answered. They did not ask what we could offer them. They did not negotiate for trade rights or political favors. They came because we were in danger and they had the power to help. That is all. That is the entire reason. Representative Moshe shook her head. No species is that altruistic. There must be something they want. There is. Koroth smiled slightly. They want the galaxy to be better. They want species to stop preying on each other. They want the weak to have protectors. They want justice and mercy to mean something. They want to change us. No. They want us to change ourselves. They will not force us. They will not conquer us. They will simply be there, watching, waiting, and when someone calls for help, they will answer. Every time. No matter who calls. No matter how far away. Koroth turned to face the entire assembly. You are afraid of the Terrans. I understand. They are powerful beyond anything we have seen. But I have looked into their eyes. I have spoken with their admiral. And I believe them when they say they do not want to rule the galaxy. They want to protect it. But what if they change their minds? Vex asked. What if future generations of Terrans decide that conquest is easier than protection? That is always a risk. Power can corrupt any species. But I choose to believe that the Terrans know this better than anyone. They have lived with that temptation for millennia. They have resisted it again and again. Not because they are weak, but because they understand that true strength is not about what you can destroy. It is about what you choose to protect. Koroth stepped away from the podium. Her old legs were trembling from the effort of standing so long. But her voice remained strong. The Terrans have given my world something precious. They have given us hope. Not just hope that we will survive, but hope that the galaxy can become something better, something kinder, something where the helpless do not have to suffer alone. She looked at the assembled representatives one last time. I suggest that the rest of you start hoping to. 6 months later, Celia stood on the observation deck of the orbital station above Veladas Prime. The city below was being rebuilt. New buildings rose from the ashes of the old. Gardens were being planted in the craters left by Kreth bombs. Life was returning to normal, but nothing was really normal anymore. Not for Veladas Prime, not for the galaxy. Word of the Battle of Veladas Prime had spread to every inhabited system. The story was told in 100 languages on 1,000 worlds. The Deathworlders had come. The Deathworlders had saved the innocent. The Deathworlders would answer when you called. Some species reacted with fear. They strengthened their defenses. They looked nervously at the stars, wondering if Terran ships might appear in their skies. But others reacted with hope. On worlds that had been conquered by aggressive neighbors, populations began to resist. They whispered the Terran promise to each other. If you need help, call. We will come. The Kreth Dominion was in turmoil. Their defeat at Veladas Prime had shattered the myth of their invincibility. Subject worlds were rebelling. The Dominion fleet, reduced by half in a single battle, could not maintain control. Reports suggested that within a decade, the entire Dominion might collapse. Morvax had been stripped of his rank and titles. The last anyone heard, he was living in disgrace on a remote colony world, surrounded by guards who were there as much to protect others from him as to protect him from others. Some said he spent his days staring at the stars, waiting for Terran ships that never came. Because the Terrans did not pursue revenge. They did not hunt down their enemies. They simply waited, watched, protected those who asked for protection. Celia heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see a human standing in the doorway of the observation deck. He was young, with dark skin.